Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Sure. I grew up in a parsonage. My father's a pastor. My mother was an organist at the time, so I was basically swimming in faith. It was just part of my life. But I noticed sometime in my childhood, probably around 9 or 10, that there were times when I was really upset. That I seemed to overreact to things, and if something went wrong, I would feel incredibly guilty about it and lash out and just act in a way that my parents weren't sure how to deal with. As I grew to become a teenager, I started really having a lot of moments when I felt like life was pretty worthless, that I was pretty worthless, and started to develop some suicidal ideation. At that point, I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. I thought I was just a moody kid who just had was really angsty and wanted to you know just figure myself out. It didn't really occur to me that I had any kind of mental illness at the time, until I was a freshman in college. My first year in college, something happened that I felt like I had really hurt a friend of mine, and basically reacted to that by really attacking myself in a really powerful verbal way, telling myself how I was stupid, worthless, I was a piece of garbage, the world would be better off without me, and it took me all the way to climbing a tree and having a noose around my neck and being ready to end my life. And the remarkable thing through all of this is I still had faith at that point. In fact, I was up that tree praying to God for courage to do what I thought God wanted me to do. I guess I didn't really think God wanted me to kill myself, but I thought God understood that that because I simply couldn't seem to change myself and couldn't get any better, God recognized that the best thing to do would be to end my life, and I prayed for courage to do it. And the most amazing thing happened at that moment. I was standing in that tree. There were the tears streaming down my face. I was ready to do it, and it was nighttime. It was sometime in November, and it was after dark. And I saw in the distance this light shine out of nowhere. And I think in on one level, it was just somebody turning their garage light on or something like that. But to me, in that moment, that was a light from God saying, "No, don't do this. Don't do this." And I climbed back down the tree, and the next thing I knew, a couple days later, I was in the student health center, because I thought I had, I was getting the flu or something like that. And the nurse there asked me if I was under any stress, and I decided, as a brilliant 17-year-old, to say, "Well, I did try and kill myself a couple days ago," not realizing what that would start. And what that started was an 11-day stay in a mental hospital, which was tremendously important and healing for me. I know a lot of people have horror stories about hospitals, but my story was actually very positive. I met some other patients there who were really normal, and that really surprised me. That it wasn't a bunch of people from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was people who were normal people who were having a really hard time dealing with something in their life, and I realized that's probably who I am too. I'm a normal person who's trying to deal with something in my life. Sure, sure. I took a couple things from that. One thing I took from it is I was astonished at how many of my friends and family were um, devastated that this had happened. I was shocked at how it affected them. I didn't think this would affect anybody. As it turns out, yeah, people were really upset. In fact, there was one friend of mine who refused to talk to me for a while afterwards. She was so angry. She got over that eventually, but that meant that really left a mark with me that this really that I touched other people. So one thing that it showed me was how much people actually cared. But the program itself, I think the biggest thing that I left with was a sense that I'm not alone in this. That I'm not the only person who feels this way sometimes, and that there is help out there, and it's okay to ask for that help. Like I said, I grew up in a parsonage. I knew the life of a pastor. I knew, or at least, I knew living with one. And I, continued being really active in church life as I went to college, and I ended up going to seminary right out of college. And I didn't go there because I wanted to be a pastor. At that point, I just wanted to learn more about God. I was finding that my religion courses were incredibly, interesting to me, and so I wanted to just keep learning about God. And I did not want to be a pastor. I mean, and that should have been a sign to me of something, but I mean, I was sure that I would never be a pastor. So I graduated with a Master of Divinity and discovered that if you're not going to be ordained, a Master of Divinity is not the most door opening degree there is. And But I did end up getting a job as a Christian ed and youth director of a church. I was a full time youth director, and that was okay. That felt like a good match for me. I was still working for the church, but I was not a pastor, which I did never ever wanted to be. And I continued to have to struggle with depression as well at that point. It didn't go away just because I had that stay in the hospital. But then I ended up going on this retreat after being at that church about 5 years. I went on this retreat, and while I was there, I had this tremendous experience where no fewer than six people who I met at the retreat, people who I had known from seminary and I'd known from different places, came up to me and said, "I never understood why you didn't become a pastor. You'd be a good one." I heard that from six people. In addition to that, I had the opportunity to interact with someone I had hurt at seminary. I had said some insensitive things, and she um, heard them in a way I didn't intend. And at that time, I was so arrogant to think, well, I didn't mean it that way, so she shouldn't take it that way. So I never apologized properly. But at that retreat, I just decided I don't want this hanging over me anymore. I went up to her and I said, I owe you a long overdue apology for what I said, 6 years ago, and she forgave me. And something about those two things happening, that experience of all those other people telling me I that they thought I should be a pastor, and feeling this kind of forgiveness that had been, kind of stewing inside me for so long. Um, that weekend, I almost verbally heard the voice of God saying, "All right, it's time to stop compromising with me. It's time to become a pastor like I always wanted you to be." And one thing I realized pretty quickly over the next few days was that I had always known I was called to be a pastor. That's why I fought against it so much. But I always felt so inadequate um and unworthy. And in a way I kind of know better, because it's not like pastors are any holier than anyone else, but somehow I felt like I was so broken and so wrong inside that I couldn't be the thing God wanted me to be, whatever it was. But I finally, kind of heard that weekend. So it was, so that was actually an experience of faith and mental illness kind of crashing into each other there, because it was my mental illness that was telling me, um, you can't ever be a pastor because you're a piece of garbage, and pieces of garbage aren't pastors. And the voice of God kind of telling me, uh-uh, that's not the voice to listen to. I called you to be this, and it's time, and I'm going to walk with you. And it was amazing how the doors just kind of opened up. And I, even though I'd finished my seminary degree, I still had a number of hoops to jump through and internships to do and things like that. But they all kind of fell into place almost like it was planned. And within 2 years, I was, I had been ordained and was in my first call as a pastor. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I think the societal stigma around depression and other mental illnesses has gotten a lot better in the past few decades, but it's not gone. It's still there, and I think it really does rear its head in the church a lot through things like, well, if you just pray harder, it'll go away, or you just must not have enough faith. And what I often compare it to is is someone who has diabetes or cancer. We don't generally tell them, well, just pray harder and it'll go away. No, what we usually do is pray with them and encourage them to get the treatment they need. Recognize that there is a medical thing they need to do. It doesn't mean prayer is wrong, but it means that prayer is not going to by itself, solve this medical problem. And I think it's really important to recognize that mental illness is the same sort of thing. It's not a moral failure. It's not a spiritual failure. Although the voice inside you can tell you that it is. The reality is, I've got an illness that is treatable. At this point in my life, I don't believe I'll ever be cured of it, though I could be wrong about that. But I think it's something I can live with, and something that through I see a therapist regularly. I do take some antidepressant medication, and I think between those things and and trying to keep a good prayer life, I think I can live with this. Um, I often compare it to Paul's thorn that Paul wrote about in his letters. That that he had this thing that he was never really identified what it is, but he had this thing that was keeping him down, and he prayed to God to take it away, and God said, "No, I'm not going to take it away. My strength is in your weakness." And I've found that, like, paradoxically, that being open about this has become a strength. If I can share another story, the um, the the church I'm at right now, I've been here for 11 years, and when I first got here, I had always tried to really think and plan how I was going to start talking about, depression and mental illness at churches before. I wanted to make sure that I didn't worry people and upset people, and had to, kind of do it the right way. But when I got to this church, I just decided really early on, you know what? I just want to know where I stand here. And if they can't accept a pastor who's open about this, then let's just call it quits now and I'll move on. So within 6 months of being the pastor here, I actually, in a sermon, I don't remember exactly how I got to this point in the sermon. It was somehow tied in with the gospel reading, I think. But what I got to was, I started sharing I live with depression, and I explained to people what depression feels like in my experience, what it does to me, what kind of things go on, and I said, we all have um, burdens in our life that make life difficult for us. This is mine. I invite you now to share aloud, if you're comfortable doing so, what yours is. And I expected at that moment to hear crickets. I thought, okay, maybe one or two really extroverted people would shout something out, and then we'd move on. Um, but at least a third, maybe half of the congregation actually called things out. Things like cancer, things like dealing with my grandchild, things like a couple people said anxiety, or even a couple said depression. And it was kind of at that moment that I knew this is a safe place for me, and this is a place we can really, you know, grow together. And since then, it's become something we talk about. We're a congregation that talks about mental illness, and I don't think we would have been if I hadn't if I hadn't done that. And people come up to me and say, "I'm really struggling with something now, Pastor. Can we talk?" I think of the way that pastors who have gone through cancer have a special relationship with people in their congregations with cancer that that you can't have otherwise. And I feel like I have that special relationship with people, struggling with depression, anxiety, things like that. And I think it's just been very healing for others, and it's been very healing for me. Oh, oh. A lot of people think that depression is all about being sad, and that is indeed part of it. A deep, powerful sadness is one piece of it, and sometimes it's a sadness that you can't even pinpoint why. Why am I sad? What's causing this, and you don't know. But it's also more than that. A lot of people experience depression as a lack of motivation. That there are some people who in the worst moments of it literally cannot get out of bed. There are some times when taking a shower is a major accomplishment for the day, because it just saps all of your energy away. One of the most vivid ways that I describe my experience of it is as a voice. I call it the dark voice. It's a voice in my head, and it's not really like a it's not like a I don't really think it's a demon or any kind of supernatural thing, but it's part of me, unfortunately, that tells me over and over and over again how much I've messed up. It tells me that I am the same piece of garbage that I thought I was at 17. It tells me, it's going to tell me after this interview that I did a terrible job and I should not have been on here in this, and I'm wasting people's time. And at this point, I can kind of laugh about it because it's so predictable, but it's strong. It's a really powerful voice because it's me. It has access to all my memories, and it's exactly as smart as I am. And it can be very hard to stop listening to it. What I find really helpful in my life is that I also, have the voice of God speaking to me, and when I can hear that, when I can hear, what I experience as the kind of the still small voice of God, it's kind of whispering to me saying, "No, none of that's true. I love you." Um, and sometimes it feels like the old cartoon devil and angel on your shoulders, trying to talk to you. But yeah, it's for me, it's a tremendous sense of guilt, and I find forgiving myself to be very difficult often. When something goes wrong, I still to this day will get into a pretty quick spiral down of guilt and self blame. But I've gotten much better at kind of arresting that spiral before it gets too far. Whereas years ago it would have gotten me to the point of suicide. So that's my experience of depression. It's not everyone's. There's different ways to describe it, but that's mine. Yeah. I think the most powerful moment I've ever had with that was, I had just, and this was in my job. I had just done a funeral, and this was one of these funerals that I didn't really know the person. It was somebody that the funeral director called me and said, "Hey, would you do this funeral for us?" And I did, and I met with the family. I got to know a little bit about the person, and I thought I did a fairly decent job of talking about his life and of course proclaiming the resurrection. But afterwards, someone came up to me at the graveside and said, "It would have been nice if you'd mentioned his first wife," and just walked away. And when I think about it objectively, I think, well, I didn't know this guy from Adam, and you should be happy that I even knew he had a second wife. But as I went back into my office then to kind of take my robes off and change, I could feel the voice coming up and saying, "You should have known about his first wife, and you hurt her, and you offended this woman, and she is now going to be upset for the rest of her life." And I just said, "Time out. You know what? Fine. Bring it on. I'm giving you 2 minutes, and you just go to town, and then we're done with this." And I did. I just kind of like for the next 2 minutes, I just listened as it just spouted off, and then I said, "Okay, we're done. I'm moving on." And I have not been able to do that all the time, but that moment was amazing. It was amazing. Yeah. 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 Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing because I didn't try to pretend it wasn't there. I didn't say like, "No, you're not real." I said, "Okay, you're real, but you're in a box, and I'm going to put this box away in 2 minutes. So have fun." Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best the best way to support someone who may have some kind of mental illness, and so it sometimes it depends, do they recognize it or not? But I think showing them that you love them unconditionally is huge. Just being there with them, especially if they get into a the kind of depression where they're not showing up to things right now. They're having a really hard time moving. Just try and show them you're there. And maybe that's as simple as just sending them a text message every day, just to say, "Hey, I'm thinking about you." And not always make it about, how are you today, and what can I do to help you, because sometimes that can make you feel like the patient, and that's not always the most helpful thing. But to be there, to just show them that you're there, whether you understand it or not. I think some things to avoid is to make it something simple, like to say, oh, just look on the bright side and everything will be okay. Well, most of us have thought of that and tried it. Um, that doesn't always work. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't show them something like I saw this and thought it would make you happy. You can show that to them, but don't act as though don't minimize is a good way to put it. Because that's their life. And I think if they're the kind of person who would respond well to this, to tell them that you're praying for them can be really powerful. Even if they're the kind of person who doesn't want to hear about prayer, you can still pray for them. And if and and I sometimes like to actually pray with people, in moments like that. And again, you have to know your friend or your family member whether that would be helpful or not. But yeah, pray and show them that it's okay to not be perfect. I think that's something that churches some churches need to learn better, is that you don't need to be perfect to walk in the door. I think that's part of the stigma with mental illness in the church is just a broader sense that you need to put this church mask on and be the best person you can be, and not show anyone else that you have flaws. And to me, what's the point of the church if we don't admit our flaws? Like, then why are we even here, to me? But just, be there and don't minimize it are huge. Well, one thing is that you're not alone. There are I think in my experience, I someone like me who is very open and vulnerable and talking about mental illness is not the most common thing. But people in the pulpit, and in leadership roles like this, having it is a very common thing. Um, and and I want you to know that it's okay. It's okay, and it's no reflection on your character. It's no reflection on your faith. It's a reflection of our broken world. And I would really encourage you to, to seek out and get the help you need. There are therapists out there, and I always think that talk therapy is a great first place to start. It's not always the end for, for people, but I think it's the first place to start. Reach out, and if you're in a place where that it would be problematic, then travel out of town to go get that. But take care of that, because you're worth it. God wants you to be the best, not just the best pastor you are, but the best you that you can be. God wants you to be as whole as possible, and there's help out there to get it. And if you think your congregation might be like mine and might be accepting of hearing that message, then go for it, because I'm glad I did it. It's been very healing and powerful for the congregation and for me. And I've stayed here longer than I've stayed anywhere else, and I think that's why. Sure. The best place to find me is at my website, which is on the screen there, thescholtes.com. That's TheScholtes.com. There you can find my blog that I write regularly, as well as a link to a weekly e-newsletter I write about the intersection of faith and mental illness, as well as information about my book, Dark Water, A Pastor's Memoir of Depression and Faith, which is available anywhere you can buy books. So that'd be a good place to start, is just go to my website. Thank you. I appreciate it.